All right, so we're diving into WordPress websites today,
Sounds good.
specifically for the Australian market.
Okay.
Our listener wants to build one, and they sent in this article.
Hmm.
It's called Mastering WordPress: 9 Essential Steps for Perfect Web Design.
Okay.
It's by an Australian company called Now Technology Systems.
Interesting.
And I think we can pull some good stuff from this article that goes beyond just the basics.
Yeah, I think so too.
What do you see right away that stands out to you?
Well, it's interesting how the article lays out these 9 steps,
Okay.
which on the surface seem very basic.
Right.
But then you realize
Yeah.
that they can be applied in a very specific way to connect with an Australian audience.
So you're saying it's not just a generic set of steps.
Right. It's more than just having a website.
Yeah.
It's about having a website that really resonates with Australians.
So more than just like slapping on a kangaroo and calling it a day.
Exactly.
Got it.
So the article starts off by talking about defining your website's purpose and understanding your target audience.
Okay, these seem pretty obvious. Like every website needs to do that.
Yeah, you'd think so.
So why is this especially crucial for the Australian market?
Well, I think you have to think about Australia's unique digital landscape.
Mm-hmm.
The internet is deeply ingrained in their culture,
Yeah, for sure.
and Australians are known for being pretty tech savvy,
Okay.
and they have these high expectations when it comes to online experiences.
Interesting. So are you saying like they're just more discerning online shoppers, or is it something more?
I think it goes beyond shopping.
Okay.
It's about understanding all the little nuances of the Australian market.
Like what?
Well, think about local slang, for example.
Oh, right.
Cultural references, even the humor, can be quite different from other places.
Yeah.
So you need a website that speaks their language,
Yeah.
literally and figuratively.
Like you need to make Aussies feel like you get them.
Precisely.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then you've also got the whole issue of accessibility, which is taken very seriously in Australia.
Mm.
Making sure your website is accessible to people with disabilities is a must-have over there.
Not just a nice to have.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've already touched on purpose, audience, and accessibility.
Yep.
That's 3 of the 9 steps right off the bat.
And what's interesting to me is how interconnected these first 3 steps are.
What do you mean?
Well, you can't really separate them.
I guess not.
Your website's purpose is going to influence who your target audience is.
Okay.
And then understanding your audience will help you make decisions about accessibility and design.
Right. It's like a domino effect.
Exactly. Each step influences the next.
Cool.
So in the article, steps 3 and 4 focus on choosing the right theme and planning your content.
Again, these seem pretty basic.
Right. But there are a few interesting things here specifically for the Australian market.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of nuggets are we talking about?
Well, firstly, the article really stresses choosing a responsive and SEO-friendly theme.
Okay, I feel like most people building websites already know this.
You'd think so, but I think in Australia you might want to take this a step further.
Okay.
Well, given how much Australians use their mobile devices,
Hmm.
have you considered prioritizing mobile optimization over desktop?
Really?
Yeah, really making that mobile experience top-notch.
More than the desktop version.
Yeah, it could be a real advantage.
Wow, that's interesting.
It's a bit of a flip.
Yeah, most people still think desktop first when designing a website.
Right. But remember, Australians are known for being early adopters,
Yeah, true.
and mobile usage is huge there.
So maybe flipping the script could help you stand out.
Right. And connect with the audience in a way they're used to.
So we're talking mobile first, not just responsive.
Exactly. A small but important distinction.
Okay, I like it.
Now, when it comes to content,
Okay.
the article talks about polished, localized content.
Again, seems pretty obvious.
It does, but let's think about what that really means for an Aussie audience.
Okay, break it down for me.
Well, it goes beyond just using Australian English.
Or avoiding Americanisms.
Right, it's about incorporating those cultural nuances we talked about.
Okay.
Using Aussie slang in a way that feels authentic.
Right.
Maybe referencing local events or even issues specific to Australia.
So if I'm selling hiking boots, I should be talking about the best trails in the Blue Mountains, not Yosemite.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Show your audience that you understand their interests and concerns.
Show them you get their way of life.
Right. It's about building that connection and trust.
Okay, I see. So it's like tailoring your content to resonate with the Australian psyche.
Exactly.
Fascinating.
And what I find so interesting is that when you start thinking about content in this way,
Yeah.
it can actually inform your decisions on other aspects of your website.
Like what?
Theme selection, navigation, even your overall marketing strategy.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
We're only on step 4 out of 9.
I know, right?
This is why I love these deep dives.
Me too.
You uncover so much more than just skimming the surface.
Absolutely, and we're just getting started.
All right, so to wrap up part one, let's leave our listener with this.
Okay.
If you're building a WordPress website for Australia,
Mm-hmm.
don't just think about the technical aspects.
Right.
Think about the cultural aspects.
Right.
How can you make your website feel truly Australian?
Good question.
How can you connect with that Aussie spirit?
I like that those are great questions to think about.
And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore how these cultural considerations can influence some of the more technical steps in the website building process.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we've been talking about how to make a WordPress site that really works for Australia.
Right.
And you mentioned that even the technical parts need to be looked at through this cultural lens.
Yeah, exactly.
So steps 5 and 6 in this article
Mm-hmm.
deal with navigation and site speed.
Right.
Again, pretty standard stuff, but let's see how they apply to the Australian context.
That's good.
So navigation first.
Okay.
I mean, everyone knows a website needs to be easy to get around.
Right.
But does Australia have any specific quirks we should know about?
Not quirks exactly.
Okay.
More like considerations.
All right.
So remember how we talked about Australians being really tech savvy?
Yeah, and having those high expectations.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, that goes for navigation too.
So we need to go beyond just like a clear menu and logical categories.
Yes. Think about features that would really cater to a more demanding user.
Like what?
Well, maybe some really advanced search functions
Okay.
that let users filter content in very specific ways.
Oh, so instead of just searching for shoes,
Yeah,
they might want to search for waterproof hiking boots size 9 with ankle support.
exactly. And don't forget about filters too.
Yeah.
Australians are used to having a lot of choices online,
Right.
so make it easy for them to narrow down those choices quickly.
So the navigation has to be clear, but also robust and sophisticated.
Exactly.
Got it.
Okay, now let's talk site speed.
All right.
This article mentions optimizing for speed.
Mm-hmm. Which is important for any site.
Right, but it's even more crucial in Australia.
Is it because of the whole tyranny of distance thing?
It's definitely part of it.
Like Australia's huge and internet speeds can be unreliable in some areas?
Right, but it's also about meeting those high expectations we keep talking about.
Oh, right.
Australians are used to fast internet and seamless online experiences.
Okay.
So if your website is slow, they're gone.
So we're talking lightning fast loading times no matter where the user is in Australia.
Exactly.
How do we do that?
Well, you've got the usual image compression and code optimization,
Yeah.
but you might also want to consider a content delivery network.
A CDN.
Right, it basically distributes your website's content across multiple servers around the world.
So when an Australian user goes to the site, the content is served from a closer server.
Exactly, faster loading times.
Wow. It's like having local shops for your website content.
I like that.
That's a good way to think about it.
And don't underestimate the power of choosing a good hosting provider with servers in Australia.
Oh, so the server location matters.
It can make a big difference, especially in a country as geographically spread out as Australia.
Right. A local server means faster loading times.
Exactly.
Cool. So we've got slick navigation and super fast speeds.
Right.
What's next?
Steps 7 and 8 are all about SEO and plugins.
Okay.
This is where you can get really strategic.
All right. I'm guessing local SEO is a big one here.
You bet.
Okay.
We talked about general SEO earlier,
Right.
but local SEO is all about making sure your website shows up when Australians are searching for something in their area.
Okay. So if I'm a plumber in Perth,
Yeah,
I want to be at the top of the list when someone searches for plumbers in Perth.
exactly. And the article has some great tips for this.
Like what?
Well, things like optimizing your Google My Business listing,
Mm-hmm.
using local keywords in your content, and building local citations.
Hold on. What are local citations?
It's basically any online mention of your business name, address, and phone number on other websites.
So like being listed in an online business directory?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the more consistent and accurate these citations are,
Mm-hmm.
the more trustworthy your business seems to search engines.
Which can boost your ranking.
Right.
So it's not just about what's on my website. It's about how my business information appears across the web.
Exactly. It's about building that web of trust and authority.
Okay.
This is where local directories, industry associations, even community websites become really important.
It's all starting to make sense.
It all connects.
Yeah.
And that's what's so great about this whole process. When you really start thinking about your target audience,
Yeah.
everything from navigation to site speed to SEO, it all becomes connected.
So we're not just ticking boxes, we're creating a whole experience that's right for Australia. That brings
Exactly.
us to plugins,
Right.
which can add a lot of functionality to your website.
And personality.
Yeah.
You can really connect with your Australian audience through the right plugins.
The article mentions choosing plugins carefully, which makes sense, but there are so many options. Any recommendations specifically for the Australian market?
Well, one that comes to mind is a plugin for Australian payment gateways.
Okay.
Australians are using digital wallets and other payment methods more and more.
Right.
So you have to make checkout really easy.
So maybe we need something more specific than just the standard PayPal or Stripe.
Exactly. And there are also plugins for things like shipping and tax calculations.
Right. Which can get complicated in Australia.
Oh, yeah. Especially with all the different states and territories.
Yeah, the GST and all that.
It can be a headache.
For sure.
So plugins that can automate these calculations are a lifesaver.
And they make sure you're following all the rules.
Exactly.
So we've got payment gateways, shipping taxes. What else?
Well, social media integration is always important,
Mm-hmm.
but in Australia, you might want to focus on platforms like Facebook and Instagram.
Okay.
They're really popular over there.
So plugins that make it easy for people to share content or leave reviews on those platforms.
Exactly. And don't forget about email marketing plugins. But in Australia, you might want to use a local provider.
Oh, why is that?
Well, they'll be more familiar with Australian anti-spam laws.
That makes sense.
You want to make sure you're doing things by the book.
So we're not just choosing plugins based on what they do, but also how well they fit into the Australian context.
Exactly.
See.
It's all about thinking strategically and making sure every part of your website is working together to create a really smooth and localized experience.
I like that.
It's all connected.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in this part. Navigation site, speed, SEO plugins.
We have.
What's the one big takeaway you want to leave with our listeners?
I would say think about the details.
Okay.
Don't just assume that what works in other places will automatically work in Australia.
Right.
Take the time to really understand how Australians use the internet
Mm-hmm.
and then tailor your approach to fit that.
That's a great reminder.
And in the next part of our deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
we'll look at some practical resources and tips to help you actually implement all of this.
Perfect. To help you create a WordPress website that really thrives in Australia.
That's the goal.
Stay tuned, everyone. Welcome back to our deep dive on building WordPress websites for the Australian market.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
Really looked at how to tailor a site for those Aussie users.
Exactly. And now it's time to give our listeners some tools and resources.
To help them put it all into practice.
Yeah, where does someone even begin looking for this kind of Australia-specific WordPress help?
Well, the great thing about WordPress is that it's a global community,
Right?
but there are definitely places where you can find Australian expertise.
Okay, like where?
A good starting point is the WordPress.org support forum.
Oh, yeah.
You can actually filter by region there.
Really?
So you're connecting with people who understand the Australian
That's
context.
so helpful.
Yeah, so you're not getting advice that doesn't really apply down under.
Right, exactly.
And speaking of local knowledge, have you thought about Australian WordPress communities?
Not really. Tell me more.
Well, there are groups like the WordPress Sydney Meetup Group
Right.
or the Melbourne WordPress Group.
I see.
They host events and workshops.
That's cool.
It's a great way to meet people and hear about real-world experiences.
I bet you can pick up some awesome tips at those meetups.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, so it's not just about technical help. It's about understanding the whole culture of doing business online in Australia.
Exactly.
What are the trends? What are the challenges? That kind of thing.
Yeah, you can learn a lot for people who are actually working in that market every day.
Like getting insider information.
I like that.
Okay, so we've got the forum and local communities. Any other resources you'd recommend, like specific websites or tools?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Believe it or not, the Australian government actually has a really good website.
Really?
Yeah, it's all about digital business.
Huh.
And they have a whole section on web accessibility.
Which we've talked about is so important in Australia.
Exactly. They have guidelines and even tools to check your website's compliance.
Awesome. So you can make sure you're doing things the right way.
Right, legally and ethically.
Perfect.
And if you want to get serious about local SEO,
Yeah.
Moz is a great resource.
I love Moz.
They have guides specifically for Australian businesses,
Cool.
covering everything from keyword research to building those local citations we talked about.
Moz is like the SEO Bible, in my opinion.
They really are experts.
Okay, so what about design inspiration?
That's a good one.
Where do you look for that?
I would say check out the websites of successful Australian brands.
Oh, that's smart.
See what they're doing with design, content, user experience, that kind of thing.
Like taking a virtual field trip.
Yeah, exactly.
And pay attention to those cultural elements we talked about.
Right.
The language, the humor, the images.
You can get a feel for what really resonates with an Australian audience.
Makes sense. So we've got communities, government resources, SEO tools, even looking at what the competition is doing.
It's all part of the process.
Anything else we should add to our toolbox?
Don't forget about feedback.
Oh!
Get your website in front of some actual Australians.
Okay.
Friends, family, even a small focus group.
Get their honest opinions.
Exactly. It's like user testing.
That's where the rubber meets the road.
You can have the most amazing website technically,
Yeah.
but if it doesn't resonate with your audience, it's not going to work.
So it's all about constantly testing and refining.
Yeah, that feedback loop. Build, test, refine, repeat.
Exactly. And I think that's a great point to end on.
What's that?
Building a website is a journey.
It is.
It's not a destination. You're never really finished.
It's all about learning and adapting and evolving.
Well said. All right. I think we've given our listener a lot to think about.
We have.
Any final words of wisdom as we wrap up this deep dive?
Don't be afraid to experiment.
I like that.
WordPress is so flexible.
It is.
Try different themes, plugins, approaches.
Yeah.
See what works best for your business and your audience.
That's a great point to end on. Don't be afraid to play around, have some fun, make it your own.
Absolutely. And remember, the Australian market is full of opportunities. With a little effort and a lot of passion. You can create a website that not only thrives in Australia, but also leaves a lasting impression on your audience.
Love that. That's it for our deep dive into mastering WordPress for the Australian market.
Hope you enjoyed it.
We hope you found it helpful and inspiring.
Go build something amazing.
That's right. Go build something amazing. We'll see you next time.